All right, we are coming up on a little past. Don't quibble over the details. We're coming up on 8 o'clock, so let's get settled in. Let's get comfortable. Grab a drink, pull up a chair, find a fuzzy friend of your own, and let's jump back into our reading tonight. This lovely Sunday Mother's Day evening. Welcome back. I did not update which book we're reading or what drink is on tap tonight, so just a moment, let's get that fixed. All right. So, tonight we are getting back into A Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Good old Mark Twain to round out a nice, quiet Sunday. As always, we can look back a little bit on what we read last time. I can safely say that I was not really expecting the direction that things took last time we were reading this. The undercover escapades of the boss and King Arthur together, posing as peasantry, going across the countryside, really went better than I expected. King Arthur himself was a little slow on the uptake on what being undercover really meant, but his heart seems to be in the right place, which is a bit of a divergence from what we've seen of the general perception of King Arthur or the knight or any of the people outside of the peasantry among the court in the kingdom that Twain and the boss have really seen or put forward. Generally, it's sort of dismissive against anyone among the ruling class, the aristocracy, the nobility, and the knights in general, writing them off as children with far too much power behind their words and actions, which isn't terribly incorrect of a take, but in this last session we did see a bit of a dawning respect for the king showing. He may not have the clearest of actions behind it, but his heart is in the right place. He's trying to do good, and he's compassionate where and within the guardrails of his own lived experience. Which, coming from the perspective of the boss, is a big step up in the right direction. Before, he'd been patiently suffering under the king, just waiting for a chance to provide his own policies and supplant the general direction that was given to the kingdom. But as he sees it now, there's maybe a little bit there to be salvaged after all. So it is nice to see a generally beloved character be seen as more than just a convenient dupe, even by Mark Twain. So, with that little bit of preamble, let's get back into where we left off last time. I think the undercover aspect is more or less finished, and we're moving on to other aspects now. Alright, so tonight we resume from chapter 32 of A Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. Well, when that cargo arrived toward sunset, Saturday afternoon, I had my hands full to keep the Marcos from fainting. They were sure Jones and I were ruined past help, and they blamed themselves as accessories to this bankruptcy. You see, in addition to the dinner materials, which called for a sufficiently round sum, I had bought a lot of extras for the future comfort of the family. For instance, a big lot of wheat, a delicacy as rare to the tables as their class as was ice cream to a hermit's. Also a sizable deal dinner table. Also 2 entire pounds of salt, which was another piece of extravagance in those people's eyes. Also crockery, stools, the clothes, a small cask of beer, and so on. I instructed the Marcos to keep quiet about this sumptuousness, so as to give me a chance to surprise the guests and show off a little. Concerning the new clothes, the simple couple were like children. They were up and down all night to see if it wasn't nearly daylight, so that they could put them on, and they were into them at last as much as an hour before dawn was due. Then their pleasure, not to say delirium, was so fresh and novel and inspiring that the sight of it paid me well for the interruptions which my sleep had suffered. The king had slept just as usual, like the dead. The Marcos could not thank him for their clothes, that being forbidden, but they tried every way they could think of to make him see how grateful they were, which all went for nothing. He didn't notice any change. It turned out to be one of those rich and rare fall days, which is just a June day toned down to a degree where it is heaven to be out of doors. Yeah, there's definitely something to be said there where money may not buy happiness, but it can sure as hell do away with any sort of troubles. So, to sleep easy with a full bank account is much easier. Toward noon, the guests arrived, and we assembled under a great tree and were soon as sociable as old acquaintances. Even the king's reserve melted a little, though it was some little trouble to him to adjust himself to the name of Jones along at first. I had asked him to try not forget that he was a farmer, but I had also considered it prudent to ask him to let the thing stand at that, and not elaborate it any, because he was just the kind of person you could depend on to spoil a little thing like that if you didn't warn him. His tongue was so handy, and his spirit so willing, and his information so uncertain. Dowley was in fine feather, and I early got him started, and then adroitly worked him around onto his own history for a text, and himself for a hero. And then it was good to sit there and hear him hum. Self-made man, you know. They know how to talk. They do deserve more credit than any other breed of men. Yes, that is true. And they are among the very first to find it out, too. He told how he had begun life an orphan lad, without money and without friends able to help him, and how he had lived as the slaves of the meanest master lived. How his day's work was from 16 to 18 hours long, and yielded him only enough black bread to keep him a half-fed condition. How his faithful endeavors finally attracted the attention of a good blacksmith, who came near knocking him dead with kindness by suddenly offering, when he was totally unprepared, to take him as his bound apprentice for 9 years, and give him board and clothes, and teach him the trade, or mystery, as Dowley called it. That was his first great rise, his first gorgeous stroke of fortune, and you saw that he couldn't speak of it without a sort of eloquent wonder and delight that such a gilded promotion should have fallen to the lot of a common human being. He got no new clothing during his apprenticeship, but on his graduation day his master tricked him out in spang new tolins, and made him feel unspeakably rich and fine. "I remember me of that day," the wheelwright sang out with enthusiasm. "And I likewise," cried the mason. "I would not believe they were thine own. In faith, I could not." "Nor other," shouted Dowley with sparkling eyes. "I was like to lose my character, the neighbours wending I had mayhap been stealing. It was a great day, one forgotteth not days like that." He and his master was a fine man, and prosperous, and always had a great feast of meat twice in the year, and with it white bread, true wheaten bread, in fact, lived like a lord, so to speak, and in time Dowley succeeded to the business and married the daughter. "And now consider what is come to pass," said he impressively. 2 times in every month there is fresh meat upon my table." He made a pause here to let that fact sink home, then added, "and 8 times salt meat." "It is even true," said the wheelwright with bated breath. "I know it of mine own knowledge," said the mason, in the same reverent fashion. "On my table appeareth white bread every Sunday in the year," added the master smith with solemnity. I leave it to your own consciences, friends. Is this not also true? By my head, yes, cried the mason. I can testify it, and I do, said the wheelwright. And of furniture, ye shall say yourselves what mine equipment is. He waved his hand in fine gesture of granting frank and unhampered freedom of speech, and added, Speak as ye are moved. Speak as ye would speak, and if I were not here. Ye have fine tools, and of the sweetest workmanship at that, albeit your family is but 3, said the wheelwright with deep respect. And 6 wooden goblets, and 6 platters of wood, and 2 of pewter to eat and drink from withal, said the mason impressively. And I say it as knowing God is my judge, and we tarry not here always, but must answer at the last day for the things said in the body, be they false, or be they sooth. Now ye know what manner of man I am, brother Jones, said the smith with a fine and friendly condescension. And doubtless ye would look to find me a man jealous of his due of respect, and but sparing of outgo to strangers till their rating and quality be assured. But trouble yourself not as concerning that. Wit ye well, ye shall find me a man that regardeth not these matters, but is willing to receive any, he as his fellow and equal, that carrieth a right heart in his body, be his worldly estate howsoever modest. And in token of it, here is my hand, and I say with my own mouth we are equals, equals. And he smiled around on the company with the satisfaction of a god who is doing the handsome and gracious thing and is quite well aware of it. The king took the hand with a poorly disguised reluctance, and let go of it as willingly as a lady lets go of a fish, all of which had a good effect, for it was mistaken for an embarrassment natural to one who was being called upon by greatness. Oh, Hazy, thanks for resubbing. Aha! And we're round again. All right, let's see, where were we? The dame brought out the table now and set it under the tree. It caused a visible stir of surprise, it being brand new and a sumptuous article of deal. But the surprise rose higher still when the dame, with a body oozing easy indifference at every pore, but eyes that gave it all away by absolutely flaming with vanity, slowly unfolded an actual Simon pure tablecloth and spread it. That was a notch even above the blacksmith's domestic grandeurs, and it hit him hard. You could see it. But Marco was in paradise. You could see that, too. Then the dame brought 2 fine new stools. Woo-hoo-hoo! That was a sensation. It was visible in the eyes of every guest. Then she brought 2 more, as calmly as she could. Sensation again, with awed murmurs. Again, she brought 2, walking on air. She was so proud. The guests were petrified, and the mason muttered, There is that about earthly pomps which doth ever move to reverence. As the dame turned away, Marco couldn't help slapping on the climax while the thing was hot. So he said, with what was meant for a languid composure, but was a poor imitation of it, Oh, these suffice, leave the rest. So there were more yet. It was a fine effect. I couldn't have played the hand better myself. From this out, the madam piled up the surprises with a rush that fired the general astonishment up to 150 in the shade, and at the same time paralyzed expression of it down to gasped ohs and ahs, and mute upliftings of hands and eyes. She fetched crockery, new and plenty of it, new wooden goblets and other table furniture, and beer, fish, chicken, a goose, eggs, roast beef, roast mutton, a ham, a small roast pig, and a wealth of genuine white wheaten bread. Take it by and large, that spread laid everything far and away in the shade that ever that crowd had seen before. And while they sat there, just simply stupefied with wonder and awe, I sort of waved my hand as if by accident and the storekeeper's son emerged from space and said he had come to collect. Oh, that's all right, I said, differently. What is the amount? Give us the items. Then he read off the bill, while those 3 amazed men listened, and serene waves of satisfaction rolled over my soul, and alternate waves of terror and admiration surged over Marco's. Let's see if we can get a better view of this. Maybe. Let's just... I'll save the image and read it off here. All right, so the butcher's bill here and the grocer's bill. 2 pounds salt, 200 pence, whatever the denomination here is going to end up being. 8 dozen pints of beer in the wood, 3 bushels wheat, 2 pounds fish, 3 hens, 1 goose, 3 dozen eggs, 1 roast of beef, 1 roast of mutton, 1 ham, 1 sucking pig, 2 crockery dinner sets, 2 men's suits and underwear, 1 stuff and 1 linsey-woolsey gown and underwear, 8 wooden goblets, various table furniture, 1 deal table, 8 stools, 2 miller guns, loaded. He ceased. There was a pale and awful silence. Not a limb stirred, not a nostril betrayed the passage of breath. "Is that all?" I asked in a voice of the most perfect calmness. All, fair sir, save that certain matters of light moment are placed together under a head light sundries. If it would like you, I will... Oh, it is of no consequence, I said, accompanying the words with a gesture of the most utter indifference. Give me the grand total, please. What do we get here? Oh, okay. I guess we have a new or temporary emote unlocked because of Z's incredible generosity with the hype train there. We unlocked the So Cinema there. Well, that's fun. I suppose that's how that works. All right. The clerk leaned against the tree to stay himself and said, 39,150 milrays. The wheelwright fell off his stool. The others grabbed the table to save themselves, and there was a deep and general ejaculation of, "God be with us in the day of disaster." The clerk hastened to say, My father charges me to say he cannot honorably require you to pay it all at this time, and therefore only prayeth you. I paid no more heed to that than if it were the idle breeze, but with an air of indifference, amounting almost to weariness, got out my money and tossed $4 on the table. You should have seen them stare. The clerk was astonished and charmed. He asked me to retain one of the dollars as security until he could go to town, and I interrupted. What? And fetch back 9 cents? Nonsense! Take the whole. Keep the change. There was an amazed murmur to this effect. Verily, this being is made of money. He throweth it away even as if it were dirt. The blacksmith was a crushed man. The clerk took his money and reeled away drunk with fortune. I said to Marco and his wife, Good folk, here is a little trifle for you, handing the miller guns as if they were a matter of no consequence, though each of them contained 15 cents in solid cash. And while the poor creatures went to pieces with astonishment and gratitude, I turned to the others and said, as calmly as one would ask the time of day, Well, if we're all ready, I judge the dinner is. Come, fall to. Well, it was immense. Yes, it was a daisy. I don't know that I ever put a situation together better, or got happier spectacular effects out of the materials available. The blacksmith, he was simply mashed. Land, I wouldn't have felt what that man was feeling for anything in the world. Here he had been blowing and bragging about his grand meat feast twice a year, and his fresh meat twice a month, and his salt meat twice a week, and his white bread every Sunday the year round, all for a family of 3. The entire cost for the year not above 69.26, 69 cents, 2 meals and 6 meal days. And all of a sudden, here comes along a man who slashes out nearly $4 on a single blowout. And not only that, but acts as if it made him tired to handle such small sums. Yes, Dowley was a good deal wilted, and shrunk up and collapsed. He had the aspect of a bladder balloon that's been stepped on by a cow. I'm not sure. I don't remember the... Yeah, imagine $4 being a lot. Not only a lot, to be like a lot. That's like showing up and pulling an Oprah. Car for you, car for you, car for you. I'm not sure if I remember what the blacksmith really did to deserve being laid out like that. Aside from just being a general git and trying to flex his own wealth. But, we'll take it, right? All right, let's continue with Chapter 33. 6th Century Political Economy. Oh, we're getting into the weeds here. However, I made a dead set at him, and before the first third of the dinner was reached, I had him happy again. It was easy to do, in a country of ranks and castes. You see, in a country where they have ranks and castes, a man isn't ever a man. He is only part of a man. He can't ever get his full growth. You prove your superiority over him in station, or rank, or fortune, and that's the end of it. He knuckles down. You can't insult him after that. No, I don't mean quite that. Of course, you can insult him. I only mean it's difficult. And so, unless you've got a lot of useless time on your hands, it doesn't pay to try. I had the smith's reverence now, because I was apparently immensely prosperous and rich. I could have had his adoration if I had had some little gimcrack title of nobility. And not only his, but any commoners in the land, though he were the mightiest production of all the ages, in intellect, worth, and character, and I bankrupted in all 3. This was to remain so, as long as England should exist in the earth. That's not a very generous look toward England there, Mark. With the spirit of prophecy upon me, I could look into the future and see her erect statues and monuments to her unspeakable Georges and other royal and noble clothes horses, and leave unhonored the creators of this world after God: Gutenberg, Watt, Arkwright, Whitney, Morse, Stephenson, Bell. The king got his cargo aboard, and then, the talk not turning upon battle, conquest, or ironclad duel, he dulled down to drowsiness and went off to take a nap. Mrs. Marco cleared the table, placed the beer keg handy, and went away to eat her dinner of leavings in humble privacy. And the rest of us soon drifted into matters near and dear to the hearts of our sort. Business and wages, of course. At a first glance, things appeared to be exceeding prosperous in this little tributary kingdom, whose lord was King Bagdemagus, as compared with the state of things in my own region. They had the protection system in full force here, whereas we were working along down toward free trade by easy stages, and we're now about halfway. Before long, Dowley and I were doing all the talking, the others hungrily listening. Dowley warmed to his work, snuffed an advantage in the air, and began to put questions which he considered pretty awkward ones for me. And they did have something of that look.
In your country, brother, what is the wage of a master bailiff, master hind, carter, shepherd, swineherd?
25 milrays a day. That is to say, a quarter of a cent. The smith's face beamed with joy. He said,
With us, they are allowed the double of it. And what may a mechanic get? A carpenter, dauber, mason, painter, blacksmith, wheelwright, and the like.
On the average, 50 milrays. Half a cent a day.
Oh, with us they are allowed 100. With us, any good mechanic is allowed a cent a day. I count out the tailor, but not the others. They're all allowed a cent a day, and in driving times they get more. Yes, up to 110 and even 15 milrays a day. I've paid 115 myself within the week. Hurrah for protection to shale with free trade.
And his face shone upon the company like a sunburst. But I didn't scare at all. I rigged up my pile driver and allowed myself 15 minutes to drive him into the earth. Drive him all in. Drive him in till not even the curve of his skull should show above ground. Here's the way I started in on him. I asked, what do you pay for a pound of salt? 100 milrays. We pay 40. What do you pay for beef and mutton when you buy it? That was a neat hit. It made the color come.
It varieth somewhat, but not much. One may say 75 milrays a pound.
We pay 33. What do you pay for eggs?
50 milrays the dozen.
We pay 20. What do you pay for beer?
It costs us 8 1/2 milrays the pint.
We get it for 4. 25 bottles for a cent. What do you pay for wheat?
At the rate of 900 milrays the bushel.
We pay 400. What do you pay for a man's toe linen suit?
13 cents.
We pay 6.
What do you pay for a stuffed gown for the wife of the laborer or the mechanic? We pay 8 cents. 4 meals.
Well, observe the difference. You pay 8 cents and 4 meals. We pay only 4 cents. I prepared now to soften to him. I said, well, look here, dear friend. What's become of your high wages you were bragging so about a few minutes ago? And I looked around on the company with placid satisfaction, for I had slipped up on him gradually and tied him hand and foot, you see, without ever noticing that he was becoming tied at all. What's become of those noble high wages of yours? I seem to have knocked the stuffing all out of them, it appears to me. But if you will believe me, he merely looked surprised, that is all. He didn't grasp the situation at all. Didn't know he had walked into a trap. Didn't discover that he was in a trap. I could have shot him from sheer vexation. With cloudy eye and a struggling intellect, he fetched this out.
Mary, I seem not to understand. It is proved that our wages be double thine. How then may it be that thou'st knocked therefrom the stuffing? And miscall not the wonderly word, this being the first time under grace and providence of God it hath been granted me to hear it.
Well, I was stunned. Partly with this unlooked-for stupidity on his part, and partly because his fellows so manifestly sided with him, and were of his mind, if you might call it mind. My position was simple enough, plain enough. How could it ever be simplified more? However, I must try. Why, look here, Brother Dowley, don't you see? Your wages are merely higher than ours in name, not in fact.
Hear him! They are doubled! You have confessed it yourself!
Yes, I don't deny that at all. But that's got nothing to do with it. The amount of the wages in mere coins, though with meaningless names attached to them to know them by, has got nothing to do with it. The thing is, how much can you buy with your wages? That's the idea. Well, it is true that with you a good mechanic is allowed $3.50 a year, and with us only about $1.75.
There! You're confessing it again! You're confessing it again! Confound it, I've never denied it.
I tell you, what I say is this. With us, half a dollar buys more than $1 buys with you, and therefore it stands to reason that the commonest kind of common sense, that our wages are higher than yours. He looked dazed and said despairingly,
Apparently, I cannot make it out. You've just said ours are the higher, and with the same breath, you take it back.
Oh, great Scott! Isn't it possible to get such a simple thing through your head? Now, look here, let me illustrate. We pay 4 cents for a woman's stuffed gown. You pay 8.40, which is 4 meals more than double. What do you allow a laboring woman who works on a farm?
2 meals a day.
Very good. We allow but half as much. We pay her only 1/10 of a cent a day, and
Again, you can— Wait!
now, you see, the thing is very simple. This time you'll understand it. For instance, it takes your woman 42 days to earn her gown, at 2 meals a day, 7 weeks' worth. But ours earns hers in 40 days, 2 days short of 7 weeks. Your woman has a gown, and her whole 7 weeks' wages are gone. Ours has a gown and 2 days' wages left to buy something else with. There. Now you understand it. He looked, he merely looked dubious. It's the most I can say, and so did the others. I waited to let the thing work. Dowley spoke at last, and betrayed the fact that he actually hadn't gotten away from his rooted and grounded superstitions yet. He said, with a trifle of hesitancy,
But you can't fail to grant that 2 meals a day is better than 1.
"Oh, shucks, well, of course." I hated to give it up, so I chanced another flyer. Let us suppose a case. Suppose one of your journeymen goes out and buys the following articles: 1 pound of salt, 1 dozen eggs, 1 dozen pints of beer, 1 bushel of wheat, 1 tow linen suit, 5 pounds of beef, 5 pounds of mutton. The lot will cost him 32 cents. It takes him 32 working days to earn the money. 5 weeks and 2 days. Let him come to us and work 32 days at half the wages. He can buy all those things for a shade under 14.5 cents. They will cost him a shade under 29 days' work, and he will have about half a week's wages left over. Carried through the year, he would save nearly a week's wages every 2 months. Your man, nothing. Thus saving 5 or 6 weeks' wages in a year, your man not a cent. Now, I reckon you understand that high wages and low wages are phrases that don't mean anything in the world until you find out which of them will buy the most. It wasn't Crusher. But alas, it didn't crush. No. I had to give it up. What those people valued was high wages. It didn't seem to be a matter of any consequence to them whether the high wages would buy anything or not. They stood for protection and swore by it, which was reasonable enough, because interested parties had gulled them into the notion that it was protection which had created their high wages. I proved to them that in a quarter of a century their wages had advanced but 30%, while the cost of living had gone up 100%, and that with us, in a shorter time, wages had advanced 40%, while the cost of living had gone steadily down. But it didn't do any good. Nothing could unseat their strange beliefs. Okay, all of this is hitting incredibly, uncomfortably close to home. Tariffs come to mind? Protective of the sort? Yes. And you try and argue with people and you get the same sort of responses. God almighty. Well, I was smarting under a sense of defeat. Undeserved defeat, but what of that? That didn't soften the smart any. And to think of the circumstances, the first statesman of the age, the capablest man, the best informed man in the entire world, the loftiest, uncrowned head that had moved through the clouds of any political firmament for centuries, sitting here, apparently defeated in argument by an ignorant country blacksmith. And I couldn't see that these others were sorry for me, which made me blush till I could smell my whiskers scorching. But put yourself in my place. Feel as mean as I did, as ashamed as I felt. Wouldn't you have struck below the belt to get even? Yes, you would. It is simply human nature. Well, that's what I did. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm only saying that I was mad, and anybody would have done it. Well,
when I make up my mind to hit a man, I don't plan out a love tap. No. That isn't my way. As long as I'm going to hit him at all, I'm going to hit him a lifter. And I don't jump at him all of a sudden and risk making a blundering halfway business of it. No. I get away off yonder to one side and work up on him gradually, so that he never suspects that I'm going to hit him at all. And by, all in a flash, he's flat on his back. And he can't tell for the life of him how it all happened. That is the way I went for Brother Dowley. I started talking lazy and comfortable, as if I was just talking to pass the time, and the oldest man in the world couldn't have taken the bearings of my starting place and guessed where I was going to fetch up. Boys, there's a good many curious things about law, and custom, and usage, and all that sort of thing. When you come to look at it, yes, and about the drift and progress of human opinion and movement, too. There are written laws. They perish. But there are also unwritten laws. They are eternal. Take the unwritten law of wages. It says they've got to advance, little by little, straight through the centuries. And notice how it works. We know what wages are now, here and there and yonder. We strike an average and say, that's the wages of today. We know what the wages were 100 years ago, and what they were 200 years ago, but that's as far back as we can get. But it suffices to give us the law of progress, the measure and rate of the periodical augmentation, and so, without a document to help us, we can come pretty close to determining what the wages were 3 and 4 and 500 years ago. Good, so far. Do we stop there? No. We stop looking backward. We face around and apply the law to the future. My friends, I could tell you what people's wages are going to be at any date in the future you want to know for hundreds and hundreds of years. What? Goodman, what? Yes. In 700 years, wages will have risen to 6 times what they are now. Here in your region, and farmhands will be allowed 3 cents a day, and mechanics 6. I wouldn't. I might die now and live then, interrupted Smug, the wheelwright, with a fine, avaricious glow in his eyes. And that isn't all. They'll get their board besides, such as it is. It won't bloat them. 250 years later, pay attention now, a mechanic's wages will be, mind you, this is law, not guesswork, a mechanic's wages will then be 20 cents a day. There was a general gasp of awed astonishment. Dixon the mason murmured with raised eyes and hands, "More than 3 weeks' pay for 1 day's work?" "Riches! Of a truth, yes, riches!" muttered Marco, his breath coming quick and short with excitement. Wages will keep on rising, little by little, as steadily as a tree grows. And at the end of 340 years more, there'll be at least one country where the mechanic's average wage will be 200 cents a day. It knocked them absolutely dumb. Not a man of them could get his breath for upwards of 2 minutes. Then the coal burner said prayerfully, "Might I live to see it?" "It is the income of an earl," said Smug. "An earl, say he? You could say more than that and speak no lie. There's no earl in the realm of Bagdemagus that hath an income like that. Income of an earl. It's the income of an angel. Now then, that is what is going to happen as regards wages. In that remote day, that man will earn, with 1 week's work, that bill of goods which it takes you upwards of 50 weeks to earn now. Some other pretty surprising things are going to happen too. Brother Dowley, who is it that determines every spring what the particular wage of each kind of mechanic, laborer, and servant shall be for that year?" "Sometimes the courts, sometimes the town council, but most of all the magistrate. You may say, in general terms, it is the magistrate that fixes the wages." "Don't ask any of those poor devils to help him fix their wages for him, does he?" "That were an idea. The master that's to pay him the money is the only one that's rightly concerned in that matter, you will notice." "Yes, but I thought that
the other man might have some little trifle at stake in it too. And even his wife and children, poor creatures. The masters are these: nobles, rich men, the prosperous generally. These few who do no work determine what pay the vast hive shall have who do work. You see, they're a combine, a trade union, to coin a new phrase, who bound themselves together to force their lowly brother to take what they choose to give. 1,300 years hence, so says the unwritten law, the combine will be the other way. And then, how these fine people's posterity will fume and fret and grit their teeth over the insolent tyranny of trade unions. Yes, indeed. The magistrate will tranquilly arrange the wages from now clear away down into the 19th century. And then, all of a sudden, the wage earner will consider that a couple of 1,000 years ago or so is enough of this one-sided sort of thing. And he will rise up and take a hand in fixing his wages himself. He will have a long and bitter account of wrong and humiliation to settle. Do you believe that he actually will help to fix his own wages? Yes, indeed, and he will be strong and able then. Brave times of a truth, sneered the prosperous smith. Oh, and there's another detail. In that day, a master may hire a man for only just one day, or 1 week, or 1 month at a time, if he wants to. What? It's true. Moreover, a magistrate won't be able to force a man to work for a master a whole year on a stretch, whether the man wants to or not. Will there be no law or sense in that day? Both of them, Dowley. In that day, a man will be his own property. Hey, Alan. Always happy to have extra lurkers about. Hope you enjoy. Both of them, Dowley. In that day, a man will be his own property, not the property of magistrate and master, and he can leave town whenever he wants to, if the wages don't suit him. And they can't put him in the pillory for it. Christian catch such an age, shouted Dowley in strong indignation. An age of dogs! An age barren of reverence for superiors and respect for authority. The pillory! Oh, wait, brother. Say no good word for that institution. I think the pillory ought to be abolished. Most strange idea. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Is a man ever put in the pillory for a capital crime? No. Is it right to condemn a man to a slight punishment for a small offense and then kill him? There was no answer. I had scored my first point. For the first time, the smith wasn't up and ready. The company noticed it. Good effect. You don't answer, brother. You were about to glorify the pillory a while ago, and shed some pity on a future age that isn't going to use it. I think the pillory ought to be abolished. What usually happens when a poor fellow is put in the pillory for some little offense that didn't amount to anything in the world? The mob try to have some fun with him, don't they? Yes. They begin by clodding him, and they laugh themselves to pieces to see him try to dodge one clod and get hit with another. Yes. Then they throw dead cats at him, don't they? Yes. Well then, suppose he has a few personal enemies in that mob, and here and there a man or woman with a secret grudge against him. And suppose especially that he is unpopular in the community, for his pride or his prosperity, or one thing or another. Stones and bricks take the place of the clods and cats presently, don't they? There's no doubt of it. As a rule, he is crippled for life, isn't he? Jaws broken, teeth smashed out, or legs mutilated, gangrene presently cut off, or an eye knocked out, maybe both eyes. It is true, God knoweth it. And if he is unpopular, he can depend on dying. Right there in the stocks, can't he? He surely can. One may not deny it. I take it none of you are unpopular, by reason of pride, or insolence, or conspicuous prosperity, or any of those things that excite envy and malice among the base scum of a village. You wouldn't think it much of a risk to take a chance in the stocks. Dowley winced, visibly. I judged he was hit, but he didn't betray it by any spoken word. As for the others, they spoke out plainly and with strong feeling. They said they had seen enough of the stocks to know what a man's chance in them was. and they would never consent to enter them if they could compromise on a quick death by hanging. Well, to change the subject, for I think I've established my point that the stocks ought to be abolished, I think some of our laws are pretty unfair. For instance, if I do a thing which ought to deliver me to the stocks, and you know I did it, and yet keep still and don't report me, you will get the stocks if anybody informs on you.
Ah, that would serve you but right, said Dowley, for you must inform, so saith the law.
The others coincided. Well, all right, let it go, since you vote me down. But there's one thing which certainly isn't fair. The magistrate fixes a mechanic's wage at 1 cent a day, for instance. The law says that if any master shall venture, even under utmost press of business, to pay anything over that cent a day, even for a single day, he shall be both fined and pilloried for it. And whoever knows he did it and doesn't inform, they also shall be fined and pilloried. Now, it seems to me unfair, Dowley, and a deadly peril to us all, that because you thoughtlessly confessed a while ago that within a week you paid a cent and a 15 mil... Oh, I tell you, it was a smasher. You ought to have seen them go to pieces. The whole gang. I had just slipped up on poor smiling and complacent Dowley so nice and easy and softly that he never suspected anything was going to happen till the blow came crushing down and knocked him all to rags. A fine effect. In fact, as fine as any I have ever produced, with so little time to work it up in. But I saw in a moment that I had overdone the thing. A little. I was expecting to scare them, but I wasn't expecting to scare them to death. They were mighty near it, though. You see, they had been a whole lifetime learning to appreciate the pillory, and to have that thing staring them in the face, and every one of them distinctly at the mercy of me, a stranger, if I chose to go and report. Well, it was awful, and they couldn't seem to recover from the shock. They couldn't seem to pull themselves together. Pale, shaky, dumb, pitiful. Why, they weren't any better than so many dead men. It was very uncomfortable. Of course, I thought they would appeal to me to keep mum, and then they would shake hands and take a drink all round and laugh it off, and there an end. But no, you see, I was an unknown person among a cruelly oppressed and suspicious people. A people always accustomed to having advantage taken of their helplessness, and never expecting just or kind treatment from any but their own families and very closest intimates. Appealed to me to be gentle, to be fair, to be generous. Of course they wanted to, but they couldn't dare. All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 33. So, this is all a little... very familiar. And we're getting into the weeds here of the political talk and the socioeconomics and everything there. And there are a few points where Mark is getting damn close to being considered, called like a, oh, I don't know, having a certain commie label thrown at him. Not that that would be an insult in my books, but you could see people would make the argument. And that's a stark reminder that really some things never change. That argument, that phrase comes up a lot with this, but Mark's very opinionated. I love the Zoe PNG. I just trimmed the background off of this one so it wouldn't get in my face so much. But the Zoe one is super good. Here's the symbol one. He's asleep up in the tree, so we'll get to him shortly. The symbol one turned out really well too. And then we've also got when they're both around. Really, I love all three of them, but I do think the Zoe one is just about perfect for just hanging out. Just up there on her pedestal, little princess crown. very, very happy with how these turned out. I did credit the artist on the emote that I used for these, so feel free to head their way. I'm certain they would be very happy. Yeah, I could just put Simba up at the top left, just up in the way all the time. He's usually hanging out in the cat tree up above us. All right, let's see. We've got about 5 minutes till the next ad. I don't really want to get... We're close enough that we can just hang out and talk for a minute before we get to that point. So, yeah, that last chapter was uncomfortably close to home in a lot of things. I certainly was reminded of people and conversations that I've had, of people that are very stuck in their ways and sure that they're better off because of the way things are going, despite, comparing it to a few years earlier where things were a different sort. But yeah. So, it's a little bit of an uncomfortable point. And as such, I'm more than happy to be distracted enough by the cats. So yes, the Zoe one, absolutely, I think captures her position in the household perfectly. She's in charge. I just give the food. So yeah, the Princess Zoe, the crown was inspired. I was very happy to have seen that thrown on. Because really, I just gave a couple pictures of the cats and like, all right, have fun. And they came back with these sketches, and I could not have asked for anything more than these. Absolutely perfect. And really, that's one of the best parts of commissioning art is you don't really know what you're going to get. Like, the artists themselves, they'll do what they can. Like, you give them something to start with. But really, so much of it comes down to just, you just have to let the artist go. And yeah, sometimes it just works. Serendipity in action. Yep. And I have to thank Z. They introduced me to this artist, I think, just after we had hit affiliate. They introduced me to this artist and I think someone else, but this is the one I landed on. Incredibly affordable. Seriously, $5 per image. It just, like, you can't beat it. Absolutely worth it. Yeah, the professional arts are a little harder sometimes because if the commissioner wants to have so much control over it, or you have a very specific idea in mind, it can be difficult. But when you're dealing with at a personal level, you find an artist who has a style you like, and then you'll never be disappointed with what comes up. And that's the best way to go about it. You shop for an artist that you already like what they do, and don't try and twist their arm into having a style that isn't what they do naturally. You let them run with their own creative comfort zone, and you'll get something that is something that they're comfortable with and proud of, and everyone's happy. Just don't get uppity with things. Yep. All right, guys, we are about a minute out from ads. Let's go ahead and fire this one off a little bit early, just a touch. Take a few minutes to wander off, stretch your legs, get the blood pumping, get a drink topped up, and we'll be back in just a few minutes to continue with A Yankee in King Arthur's Court. All right, we are back. As always, wandered off, probably snack time. Or she was following me through the house. I was getting things about, and she'll be back in a bit. We'll see. So, where were we? Well, okay, so I should be getting back in the habit of things, trying to pretend that I'm doing this on the regular. So, welcome back from our break. I should be doing introductions and such for those that wander in. So, I am Arthur Irving Rush. We have a modest little collection here of misfits and ne'er-do-wells that we have a bit of a fun time just reading together. Right now, we're reading Mark Twain's A Yankee in King Arthur's Court. A charming bit of tongue-in-cheek satire and a very early example of isekai trash that we all love. We, most of the time, are reading classics around here. On Saturdays, we branch out and read a more modern work. I hope you enjoy your stay, and if you have anything to add in, feel free to chime in and chat. Otherwise, enjoy your stay and enjoy the book. All right, let's go ahead and get started again with Chapter 34. The Yankee and the King, sold as slaves. Well, what had I better do? Nothing in a hurry, sure. I must get up a diversion. Anything to employ me while I could think. And while these poor fellows could have a chance to come to life again. There sat Marco, petrified, in the act of trying to get the hang of his miller gun, turned to stone. Just in the attitude he was in when my pile driver fell. The toy still gripped in his unconscious fingers. So I took it from him and proposed to explain its mystery. Mystery! A simple little thing like that. And yet it was mysterious enough for that race and that age. I never saw such an awkward people with machinery, you see. They were totally unused to it. The miller gun was a little double-barreled tube of toughened glass, with a neat little trick of a spring to it, which upon pressure would let a shot escape. But the shot wouldn't hurt anybody. It would only drop into your hand. In the gun were two sizes. Wee mustard seed shot, and another that were several times larger. They were money. The mustard seed shot represented mill raise, the larger one mills. So the gun was a purse, and very handy too. You could pay out money in the dark with it, with accuracy, and you could carry it in your mouth or in your vest pocket if you had one. I made them of several sizes. One size so large that it would carry the equivalent of $1, using shot for money was a good thing for the government. The metal cost nothing, and the money couldn't be counterfeited. For I was the only person in the kingdom who knew how to manage a shot tower. Paying the shot soon came to be a common phrase. Yes, and I knew it would still be passing men's lips away down in the 19th century. Yet, none would suspect how and when it originated. How good of him to explain what the miller gun was. I had no idea at all. The king joined us about this time, mightily refreshed by his nap, and feeling good. Anything could make me nervous now. I was so uneasy, for our lives were in danger, and so it worried me to detect a complacent something in the king's eye which seemed to indicate that he had been loading himself up for a performance of some kind or other. Confounded. Why must he go and choose such a time as this? I was right. He began straight off in the most innocently artful and transparent and lubberly way, to lead up to the subject of agriculture. A cold sweat broke out all over me. I wanted to whisper in his ear, "Man, we are in an awful danger. Every moment is worth a principality till we get back these men's confidence. Don't waste any of this golden time." But Of course, I couldn't do it. Whisper to him? It would look as if we were conspiring. So I had to sit there and look calm and pleasant while the king stood over that dynamite mine and mooned along about his damned onions and things. At first, the tumult of my own thoughts, summoned by the danger signal and swarming to the rescue from every quarter of my skull, kept up such a hurrah and confusion and fifing and drumming that I couldn't take in a word. But presently, when my mob of gathering plans began to crystallize and fall into position and form a line of battle, sort of order and quiet ensued, and I caught the boom of the king's batteries, as if out of remote distance.
Were not the best way, methinks, albeit it is not to be denied that authorities differ as concerning this point, some contending that the onion is but an unwholesome berry when stricken early from the tree.
The audience showed signs of life, and saw each other's eyes in a surprised and troubled way.
While as others do yet maintain, with much show of reason, that this is not of necessity the case, instancing that plums and other like cereals do be always dug in the unripe state.
The audience exhibited distinct distress, yes, and also fear.
Yet are they clearly wholesome, the more especially when one doth assuage the asperities of their nature by admixture of the tranquilizing juice of the wayward cabbage.
The wild light of terror began to glow in these men's eyes, and one of them muttered,
"These be errors, every one. God hath surely smitten the mind of this farmer."
I was in miserable apprehension. I sat upon thorns.
And further instancing the known truth that in the case of animals, the young, which may be called the green fruit of the creature, is the better, all confessing that when a goat is ripe his fur doth heat and soar and game his flesh, which defect, taken in connection with his several rancid habits and fulsome appetites and godless attitudes of mind and bilious quality of morals, they rose and went for him, with a fierce shout. The one would betray us, the other is mad. Kill him! Kill him!
They flung themselves upon us. What joy flamed up in the king's eye. He might be lame in agriculture, but this kind of thing was just in his line. He had been fasting long. He was hungry for a fight. He hit the blacksmith a crack under the jaw that lifted him clear off his feet and stretched him flat on his back.
"St. George for Britain!"
And he downed the wheelwright. The mason was big, but I laid him out like nothing. The three gathered themselves up and came again, went down again, came again, and kept on repeating this, with native British pluck, until they were battered to jelly, reeling with exhaustion and so blind they couldn't tell us from each other. And yet they kept right on, hammering away with what might was left in them, hammering each other, for we stepped aside and looked on while they rolled and struggled and gouged and pounded and bit with the strict and wordless attention to business of so many bulldogs. We looked on without apprehension, for they were fast getting past ability to go for help against us, and the arena was far enough from the public road to be safe from intrusion. Well, while they were gradually playing out, it suddenly occurred to me to wonder what had become of Marco. I looked around. He was nowhere to be seen. Oh, but this was ominous. I pulled the king's sleeve, and we glided away and rushed for the hut. No Marco there. No Phyllis there. They'd gone to the road for help, sure. I told the king to give his heels wings, and I would explain later. We made good time across the open ground, and as we darted into the shelter of the wood, I glanced back and saw a mob of excited peasants swarm into view, with Marco and his wife at their head. They were making a world of noise. That couldn't hurt anybody. The wood was dense. And as soon as we were well into its depths, we would take to a tree and let them whistle. Ha ha! But then came another sound. Dogs! Yes, that was quite another matter. It magnified our contract. We must find running water. We tore along at a good gait, and soon left the sounds far behind and modified to a murmur. We struck a stream and darted into it. We waded swiftly down it, in the dim forest light, for as much as 300 yards, and then came across an oak, with a great bough sticking out over the water. We climbed up on this bough and began to work our way along it to the body of the tree. Now we began to hear those sounds more plainly, so the mob had struck our trail. For a while, the sounds approached pretty fast, and then for another while they didn't. No doubt the dogs had found the place where we had entered the stream, and were now waltzing up and down the shores trying to pick up the trail again. When we were snugly lodged in the tree and curtained with foliage, the king was satisfied, but I was doubtful. I believed we could crawl along a branch and get into the next tree, and I judged it worth a while to try. We tried it and made success of it, though the king slipped at the junction and came near failing to connect. We got comfortable lodgment and satisfactory concealment among the foliage, and we had nothing to do but listen to the hunt. Presently we heard it coming, and coming on the jump too, yes, and down both sides of the stream, louder, louder. Next minute it swelled swiftly up into a roar of shoutings, barkings, tramplings, and swept by like a cyclone. I was afraid that the overhanging branch would suggest something to them, said I. I don't mind the disappointment. Come, my liege, it were well that we make good use of our time. We flank them. Dark is coming on presently. If we can cross the stream and get a good start and borrow a couple of horses from somebody's pasture to use for a few hours, we shall be safe enough. We started down, and got nearly to the lowest limb, when we seemed to hear the hunt returning. We stopped to listen. Yes, said I, they're baffled. They've given it up, they're on their way home. We will climb back to our roost again and let them go by. So we climbed back. The king listened a moment and said, They still search. I wait the sign. We did best to abide. He was right. He knew more about hunting than I did. The noise approached steadily, but not with a rush. The king said, They reason that we were advantaged by no parlous start of them, and being on foot are as yet no mighty way from where we took the water. Yes, sire, that is about it, I am afraid, though I am hoping better things. The noise drew nearer and nearer, and soon the van was drifting under us, on both sides of the water. A voice called to a halt from the other bank and said, And they were so minded they could get to yon tree by this branch that overhangs, and yet not touch ground. Ye will do well to send a man up it. Marry, that will do. I was obliged to admire my cuteness in foreseeing this very thing and swapping trees to beat it. But don't you know there are some things that can beat smartness and foresight? Awkwardness and stupidity can. The best swordsman in the world doesn't need to fear the second best swordsman in the world. No, the person for him to be afraid of is some ignorant antagonist who has never had a sword in his hand before. He doesn't do the thing he ought to do, and so the expert isn't prepared for him. He does the thing he ought not to do, and often it catches the expert out and ends him on the spot. Well, how could I, with all my gifts, make any valuable preparation against a near-sighted, cross-eyed, pudding-headed clown who would aim himself at the wrong tree and hit the right one? And that is what he did. He went for the wrong tree, which was, of course, the right one by mistake. And up he started. Matters were serious now. We remained still and awaited developments. The peasant toiled his difficult way up. The king raised himself up and stood. He made a leg ready, and when the comer's head arrived in reach of it, there was a dull thud, and down went the man floundering to the ground. There was a wild outbreak of anger below, and the mob swarmed in from all around, and there we were treed and prisoners. Another man started up. The bridging bough was detected, and a volunteer started up the tree that furnished the bridge. The king ordered me to play Horatius and keep the bridge. For a while the enemy came thick and fast, but no matter. The head man of each procession always got a buffet that dislodged him as soon as he came in reach. The king's spirits rose. His joy was limitless. He said that if nothing occurred to mar the prospect, we should have a beautiful night, for on this line of tactics we could hold the tree against the whole countryside. However, The mob soon came to that conclusion themselves, wherefore they called off the assault, and began to debate other plans. They had no weapons, but there were plenty of stones, and stones might answer. We had no objections. A stone might possibly penetrate to us once in a while, but it wasn't very likely. We were well protected by boughs and foliage, and were not visible from any good aiming point. If they should but waste half an hour in stone throwing, the dark would come to our help. We were feeling very well satisfied. We could smile, almost laugh. But we didn't. Which it was just as well, for we should have been interrupted. Before the stones had been raging through the leaves and bouncing from the boughs 15 minutes, we began to notice a smell. A couple of sniffs of it was enough of an explanation. It was smoke! Our game was up at last. We recognized that. When smoke invites you, you have to come. They raised their pile of dry brush and damp weeds higher and higher, and when they saw the thick cloud begin to roll up and smother the tree, they broke out in a storm of joy clamors. I got enough breath to say, "Proceed, my liege. After you is manners." The king gasped, "Follow me down, and then back thyself against one side of the trunk, and leave me the other. Then we will fight. Let each pile his dead according to his own fashion and taste." Then he descended, barking and coughing, and I followed. I struck the ground an instant after him. We sprang to our appointed places, and began to give and take with all our might. The powwow and racket were prodigious. It was a tempest of riot and confusion and thick falling blows. Suddenly some horsemen tore into the midst of the crowd, and a voice shouted, "Hold! Are ye our dead men?" How good it sounded! The owner of the voice bore all the marks of a gentleman: picturesque and costly raiment, the aspect of command, a hard countenance with complexion and features marred by dissipation. The mob fell humbly back, like so many spaniels. The gentleman inspected us critically, then said sharply to the peasants, "What are ye doing to these people?" "They be madmen, worshipful sir. They've come wandering, we know not whence, and—" "Ye know not whence? Do ye pretend ye know them not?" "Most honoured sir, we speak but the truth. They are strangers, and unknown to any in this region, and they be the most violent and bloodthirsty madmen that ever—" "Peace! Ye know not what ye say. They are not mad. Who are ye, and whence are ye? Explain." "We are but peaceful strangers, sir," I said, "and travelling upon our own concerns. We are from a far country, and unacquainted here. We have purposed no harm, and yet, but for your brave interference and protection, these people would have killed us. As you have divined, sir, we are not mad, neither are we violent or bloodthirsty." The gentleman turned to his retinue and said calmly, "Lash me these animals to their kennels." The mob vanished in an instant, and after them plunged the horsemen, laying about them with their whips and pitilessly riding down such as were witless enough to keep the road instead of taking to the bush. The shrieks and supplications presently died away in the distance, and soon the horsemen began to straggle back. Meantime, the gentleman had been questioning us more closely, but had dug no particulars out of us. We were lavish of recognition of the service he was doing us, but we revealed nothing more than that we were friendless strangers from a far country. When the escort were all returned, the gentleman said to one of his servants, "Bring the led horses and mount these people." "Yes, my lord." We were placed toward the rear, among the servants. We travelled pretty fast, and finally drew rein some time after dark at a roadside inn some 10 or 12 miles from the scene of our troubles. My lord went immediately to his room after ordering his supper, and we saw no more of him. At dawn in the morning we breakfasted and made ready to start. My lord's chief attendant sauntered forward at that moment with indolent grace and said, "Ye have said ye should continue upon this road, which is our direction likewise. Wherefore my lord the Earl Grip hath given commandment that ye retain the horses and ride, and that certain of us ride with ye 20 mile to a fair town that hight Cambernet, when so ye shall be out of peril." we could do nothing less than express our thanks and accept the offer. We jogged along, 6 in the party, at a moderate and comfortable gait, and in conversation learned that my Lord Grip was a very great personage in his own region, which lay a day's journey beyond Cambinet. We loitered to such a degree that it was near the middle of the forenoon when we entered the market square of the town. We dismounted and left our thanks once more for my lord, and then approached a crowd assembled in the center of the square to see what might be the object of interest. It was the remnant of that old peregrinating band of slaves. They had been dragging their chains about all this weary time. That poor husband was gone, and also many others, and some few purchases had been added to the gang. The king was not interested, and wanted to move along, but I was absorbed and full of pity. I could not take my eyes away from these worn and wasted wrecks of humanity. There they sat, grounded upon the ground, silent, uncomplaining, with bowed heads, a pathetic sight, and by hideous contrast, a redundant orator was making a speech to another gathering not 30 steps away, in fulsome laudation of our glorious British liberties. I was boiling. I had forgotten I was a plebeian. I was remembering I was a man. Cost what it might, I would mount that rostrum and... click! The king and I were handcuffed together. Our companions, those servants, had done it. My Lord Grip stood looking on. The king burst out in a fury and said, "What meaneth this ill-mannered jest?" My lord merely said to his head miscreant, coolly, "Put up the slaves and sell them." Slaves! The word had a new sound, and how unspeakably awful. The king lifted his manacles and brought them down with a deadly force, but my lord was out of the way when they arrived. A dozen of the rascal servants sprang forward, and in a moment we were helpless. With our hands bound behind us, we so loudly and so earnestly proclaimed ourselves freemen, and we got the interested attention of that liberty-mouthing orator and his patriotic crowd, and they gathered about us and assumed a very determined attitude. The orator said, "If indeed ye are freemen, ye have naught to fear. The God-given liberties of Britain are about ye for your shield and shelter." There's applause. "We shall soon see. Bring forth your proofs." "What proofs?" "Proof that ye are freemen." I remembered. I came to myself. I said nothing. But the king stormed out, "Thou art insane, man! It were better, and more in reason, that this thief and scoundrel here prove that we are not freemen." You see, he knew his own laws, just as other people so often know the laws, by words, not by effects. They take a meaning and get to be very vivid when you come to apply them to yourself. All hands shook their heads and looked disappointed. Some turned away, no longer interested. The orator said, and this time in tones of business, not of sentiment, "And ye do not know your country's laws. It were time ye learned them. Ye are strangers to us. Ye will not deny that. Ye may be freemen. We do not deny that. But also, ye may be slaves. The law is clear. It doth not require the claimant to prove ye are slaves. It requireth ye to prove ye are not." I said, "Dear sir, give us only time to send to Astola, or give us only time to send to the Valley of Holiness." "Peace, good man. These are extraordinary requests, and you may not hope to have them granted. It would cost much time, and would unwarrantedly inconvenience your master." "Master! Idiot!" stormed the king. "I have no master. I myself am the—" "Silence, for God's sake!" I got the words out in time to stop the king. We were in trouble enough already. It could not help us any to give these people the notion that we were lunatics. There is no use in stringing out the details. The Earl put us up and sold us at auction. This same infernal law had existed in our own South in my own time, more than 1,300 years later, and under it, hundreds of freemen who could not prove that they were freemen had been sold into lifelong slavery, without the circumstance making any particular impression upon me. But the minute law
and the auction block came into my personal experience, a thing which had been merely improper before, became suddenly hellish. Well, that's the way we are made. Yes, we were sold at auction, like swine. In a big town and an active market, we should have brought a good price, but this place was utterly stagnant, and so we sold at a figure which makes me ashamed every time I think of it. The King of England brought $7, and his Prime Minister $9, whereas the King was easily worth $12, and I was easily worth $15. But that is the way things always go. If you force a sale on a dull market, I don't care what the property is, if you are going to make a poor business of it, and you can make up your mind to it. If the Earl had wit enough to... However, there is no occasion for my working my sympathies up on his account. Let him go for the present. I took his number, so to speak. The slave dealer bought us both, and hitched us onto that long chain of his, and we constituted the rear of his procession. We took up our line of march and passed out of Cambrai at noon, and it seemed to me unaccountably strange and odd that the King of England and his chief minister, marching manacled and fettered and yoked in a slave convoy, could move by all manner of idle men and women under windows where sat the sweet and the lovely, and yet never attract a curious eye, never provoke a single remark. Dear, dear, it only shows that there is nothing diviner about a king than there is about a tramp after all. He's just a cheap and hollow artificiality when you don't know he's a king. But reveal his quality, and dear me, it takes your very breath away to look at him. I reckon we are all fools. Born so, no doubt. Alright, that brings us to the end of chapter 34. So, this was an interesting set of developments. I didn't really expect it, aside from the chapter title, but we'll suspend disbelief for that. But, Twain brings up a point there where he was aware, the boss was aware that conceptually this sort of thing was happening to real people in the South prior to abolition, where freemen, just by virtue of not having papers to prove that they were freemen, were brought back under the yoke, which is obviously an abomination against humanity and everything that is common and decent. But he makes the comment here that conceptually he knew about it, but it wasn't really striking home as much until it happened to him, which draws mirrors to all sorts of things. You look at the well-known poem about the Holocaust, where they're coming from various groups in sequence until there's no one left to speak up. You look at today when they're going after anybody who's LGBT just because there's no one that's speaking up and saying that, hey, what the fuck are you doing? These are people with every bit of rights as the rest of us. Just because it's not happening to you doesn't make it any less abhorrent. Yes, a lot of people refuse to care until it affects them. That is a tale as old as time, but we can always strive to do better. Just because I may be plain vanilla cis white dude doesn't mean I can't care and stand up for friends or even entire strangers who don't fit into the safest of demographics. So, do your part. Don't be an asshole. Stand up for people who are more vulnerable. Cat, what are you doing? I'm having a soapbox moment. Don't interrupt me. Okay? Ay. Anyway, that's my little bit of preaching. Twain marked upon a point, and it is depressing that that point is as timeless as it is.
which is very common, actually. So many of the points that Twain makes are very good points that have never stopped being relevant. But we really, really wish that we, as a people, as a society, would move past these problems. And we never do. Alright, let's go ahead and continue. And we will see what other things we might get up to. Chapter 35. A pitiful incident. It's a world of surprises. The king brooded. This was natural. What would he brood about, should you say? Why, about the prodigious nature of his fall, of course. From the loftiest place in the world to the lowest. From the most illustrious station in the world to the obscurest. From the grandest vocation among men to the basest. No, I take my oath that the thing that grappled him most, to start with, was not this, but the price he had fetched. He couldn't seem to get over the fact that $7... Well, it's done me too. Me so, when I first found out that I couldn't believe it. It didn't seem natural. As soon as my mental sight cleared and I got a right focus on it, I saw I was mistaken. It was natural. For this reason, a king is a mere artificiality. So a king's feelings, like the impulses of an automatic doll, are mere artificialities. But as a man, he is a reality, and his feelings, as a man, are real, not phantoms. It shames the average man to be valued below his own estimate of his worth. And the king certainly wasn't anything more than an average man, if he was up that high. He wearied me with arguments to show that in anything like a fair market, he would have fetched $25. Sure, a thing which was plainly nonsense and full of the baldest conceit. I wasn't worth it myself, but it was tender ground for me to argue on. In fact, I had to simply shirk argument and do the diplomatic instead. I had to throw conscience aside and brazenly concede that he ought to have brought $25. Whereas I was quite well aware that in all the ages the world had never seen a king that was worth half the money. And during the next 13 centuries wouldn't see one that was worth the fourth of it. Yes, he tired me. If he began to talk about the crops or about the recent weather or about the condition of politics or about dogs or cats or morals or theology, no matter what, I sighed, for I knew what was coming. He was going to get out of it a palliation of that tiresome $7 sale. Wherever we halted, where there was a crowd, he would give me a look which said plainly, "If that thing could be tried over again now, with this kind of folk, you would see a different result." Well, when he was first sold, it secretly tickled me to see him go for $7. But before he was done with his sweating and worrying, I wished he had fetched $100. The thing never got a chance to die. For every day at one place or another, possible purchasers looked us over, and as often as any other way, their comment on the king was something like this: "Here's a $2.50 chump with a $30 style. Pity, but style was markable." At last, this sort of remark produced an evil result. Our owner was a practical person, and he perceived that this defect must be mended if he hoped to find a purchaser for the king. So he went to work to take the style out of his sacred majesty. I could have given the man some valuable advice, but I didn't. You mustn't volunteer advice to a slave driver unless you want to damage the cause you are arguing for. I had found it a sufficiently difficult job to reduce the king's style to a peasant's style, even when he was willing and anxious pupil. Now then, to undertake to reduce the king's style to a slave style? And by force? Go to. It was a stately contract. Never mind the details. It will save me trouble to let you imagine them. I will only remark that at the end of a week, There was plenty of evidence that lash and club and fist had done their work well. The king's body was a sight to see and to weep over. But his spirit? Why, it wasn't even phased. Even that dull clod of a slave driver was able to see that there can be such a thing as a slave who will remain a man till he dies, whose bones you can break, but whose manhood you can't. This man found that from his first effort down to his latest. He couldn't ever come within reach of the king, but the king was ready to plunge for him, and did it. So he gave up at last, and left the king in possession of his style unimpaired. The fact is, the king was a good deal more than a king. He was a man. When a man is a man, you can't knock it out of him. We had a rough time for a month, tramping to and fro in the earth, and suffering. And what Englishman was the most interested in the slavery question by that time? His Grace the King! Yes, he, from being the most indifferent, he was become the most interested. He was become the bitterest hater of the institution I had ever heard talk. And so I ventured to ask once more a question which I had asked years before and had gotten such a sharp answer that I had not thought it prudent to meddle in the matter further. Would he abolish slavery? His answer was as sharp as before, but it was music this time. I shouldn't ever wish to hear pleasanter, though the profanity was not good, being awkwardly put together and with crash word almost in the middle instead of at the end, where, of course, it ought to have been. I was ready and willing to get free now. I hadn't wanted to get free any sooner. No, I cannot quite say that. I had wanted to, but I had not been willing to take desperate chances, and had always dissuaded the king from them. But now, it was a new atmosphere. Liberty would be worth any cost that might be put upon it now. I set about a plan, and was straightway charmed with it. It would require time, yes, and patience too, a great deal of both. One could invent quicker ways, and fully as sure ones, but none that would be as picturesque as this. None that could be made so dramatic. And so I was not going to give this one up. It might delay us months, but no matter. I would carry it out, or break something. Now and then we had an adventure. One night we were overtaken by a snowstorm, while still a mile from the village we were making for. Almost instantly we were shut up as in a fog. The driving snow was so thick you couldn't see a thing, and we were soon lost. The slave driver lashed us desperately, for he saw ruin before him. But his lashings only made matters worse. They drove us further from the road and from likelihood of succor. So we had to stop at last and slump down in the snow where we were. The storm continued until toward midnight, then ceased. By this time, 2 of our feebler men and 3 of our women were dead, and others past moving and threatened with death. Our master was nearly beside himself. He stirred up the living and made us stand, jump, slap ourselves to restore our circulation, and he helped us as well as he could with his whip. Now came a diversion. We heard shrieks and yells, and soon a woman came running and crying, and seeing our group, she flung herself into our midst and begged for protection. A mob of people came tearing after her, some with torches, and they said she was a witch who had caused several local cows to die by a strange disease and practiced her arts by help of a devil in the form of a black cat. This poor woman had been stoned until she hardly looked human. She was so battered and bloody. The mob wanted to burn her. Well, now, what do you suppose our master did? When we closed around this poor creature to shelter her, he saw his chance. He said, "Burn her here, or they shouldn't have her at all." Imagine that. They were willing. They fastened her to a post. They brought wood and piled it around her. They applied the torch while she shrieked and pleaded and strained her 2 young daughters to her breast. And our brute, the heart solely for business,
lashed us into position about the stake, and warmed us into life and commercial value by the same fire which took away the innocent life of that poor harmless mother. That was the sort of master we had. I took his number. That snowstorm cost him 9 of his flock, and he was more brutal to us than ever after that. For many days together, he was so enraged over his loss. We had adventures. Oh, are we having some issues there with connection? I'm not seeing dropped frames, but I do see Twitch is not happy. YouTube seems fine. It looks okay. Why is it barking about the bitrate? Huh. We should be fine. Yeah, not really seeing any issues. Strange. We had adventures all along. One day we ran into a procession, and such a procession! All the riffraff of the kingdom seemed to be comprehended in it, and all drunk at that. In the van was a cart with a coffin in it, and on the coffin sat a comely young girl of about 18 suckling a baby, which she squeezed to her breast in a passion of love every little while. And every little while wiped from its face the tears which her eyes rained down upon it. And always the foolish little thing smiled up at her, happy and content, kneading her breast with its dimpled fat hand, which she patted and fondled right over her breaking heart. Men and women, boys and girls trotted along beside or after the cart, hooting, shouting profane and ribald remarks, singing snatches of foul songs, skipping, dancing, a very holiday of hellions, a sickening sight. We had struck a suburb of London, outside the walls, and this was a sample of one sort of London society. Our master secured a good place for us near the gallows. A priest was in attendance, and he helped the girl climb up and said comforting words to her and made the undersheriff provide a stool for her. Then he stood there by her on the gallows, and for a moment looked down upon the mass of upturned faces at his feet, then out over the solid pavement of heads that stretched away on every side, occupying the vacancies far and near, and then began to tell the story of the case. And there was pity in his voice. How seldom a sound that was in that ignorant and savage land. I remembered every detail of what he said, except the words said in it, and so I changed it into my own words. Law is intended to mete out justice. Sometimes it fails. This cannot be helped. We can only grieve and be resigned, and pray for the soul of him who falls unfairly by the arm of the law, and that his fellows may be few. A law sends this poor young thing to death, and it is right. But another law had placed her where she must commit her crime or starve with her child. And before God, that law is responsible for both her crime and her ignominious death. A little while ago, this young thing, this child of 18 years, was as happy a wife and mother as any in England, and her lips were blithe with song, which is the native speech of glad and innocent hearts. Her young husband was as happy as she, for he was doing his whole duty. He worked early and late at his handicraft. His bread was honest bread, well and fairly earned. He was prospering. He was furnishing shelter and sustenance to his family. He was adding his mite to the wealth of the nation.
by consent of a treacherous law, instant destruction fell upon this holy home and swept it away. That young husband was waylaid and impressed and sent to sea. The wife knew nothing of it. She sought him everywhere. She moved the hardest heart with the supplications of her tears, the broken eloquence of her despair. Weeks dragged by, she watching, waiting, hoping, her mind going slowly to wreck under the burden of her misery. Little by little, all her small possessions went for food. When she could no longer pay her rent, they turned her out of doors. She begged while she had strength. When she was starving at last and her milk failing, she stole a piece of linen cloth of the value of a fourth part of a cent, thinking to sell it and save her child. But she was seen by the owner of the cloth. She was put in jail and brought to trial. The man testified to the facts. A plea was made for her, and her sorrowful story was told in her behalf. She spoke, too, by permission, and said she did steal the cloth, but that her mind was so disordered of late by people that when she was overborne with hunger, all acts, criminal or other, swam meaningless through her brain, and she knew nothing rightly, except that she was so hungry. For a moment, all were touched, and there was disposition to deal mercifully with her, seeing that she was so young and friendless, and her case so piteous, and the law that robbed her of her support to blame as being the first and only cause of her transgression. But the prosecuting officer replied that, whereas these things were all true, and most pitiful as well, still, there was much small theft in these days, and mistimed mercy here would be a danger to property. Oh my God, is there no property in ruined homes and orphan babes, and broken hearts that British law holds precious? And so, he must require sentence. When the judge put on his black cap, the owner of the stolen linen rose trembling up, his lip quivering, his face as gray as ashes, and when the awful words came, he cried out, "Oh, poor child, I did not know it was death!" and fell as a tree falls. When they lifted him up, his reason was gone. Before the sun was set, he had taken his own life. Kindly man, a man whose heart was right at bottom, add his murder to this that is to be now done here, and charge them both where they belong, to the rulers and the bitter laws of Britain. The time has come, my child. Let me pray over thee, not for thee, dear, abused, poor heart and innocent, but for them that be guilty of thy ruin and death, who need it more. After his prayer, they put the noose around the young girl's neck. They had great trouble to adjust the knot under her ear, because she was devouring the baby all the time, wildly kissing it and snatching it to her face and her breast, and drenching it with tears, and half moaning, half shrieking all the while, and the baby crowing and laughing and kicking its feet with delight over what it took for romp and play. Even the hangman couldn't stand it, but turned away. When all was ready, the priest gently pulled and tugged and forced the child out of the mother's arms and stepped quickly out of her reach. She clasped her hands and made a wild spring toward him with a shriek, but the rope and the undersheriff held her short. Then she went on her knees and stretched out her hands and cried, "One more kiss! Oh my God! One more! It is the dying that begs it!" She got it. She almost smothered the little thing. And when they got it away again, she cried out, "Oh, my child, my darling! It will die. It has no home. It has no father, no friend, no mother." "It has them all," said the good priest. "All these will I be to it till I die." You should have seen her face then. Gratitude? Lord, cried Simba. Lord, what do you want with words to express that? Words are only painted fire. A look is the fire itself. She gave that look, carried it away to the treasury of heaven, where all things that are divine belong. All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 35. Wow, we've had a couple very, very dark chapters. We've shifted to a look at the absolute terror of chattel slavery in general, the tyranny of the law when it is misplaced, the bots that come in and try and sell viewers, all sorts of absolute scum of history. And this was certainly a depressing turn for tonight. I wasn't really expecting this when we got started. The undercover part with the king was all well and good, but now we're really seeing the dimmest and darkest bits of this fantastical history, this fantastical realization of Arthurian England, which is sort of a corollary and example to much of Europe. One of these things seems slightly less terrible. Yeah, I'm not sure which one it is, honestly. The laundry list there was, they all seem pretty awful to me. All right. We probably have enough time in us for one more chapter tonight. Maybe things we'll start to see some light at the end of this tunnel, because this is a very depressing few chapters to end on, and I would much prefer to have something at least pretending to be on the upswing here. So, chapter 36, An Encounter in the Dark. London, to a slave, was a sufficiently interesting place. It was merely a great big village, and mainly mud and thatch. The streets were muddy, crooked, unpaved. The populace was an ever-flocking and drifting swarm of rags and splendors, of nodding plumes and shining armor. The king had a palace there. He saw the outside of it. It made him sigh, yes, and swear a little, in a poor, juvenile 6th century way. We saw knights and grandees whom we knew, but they didn't know us in our rags and dirt and raw welts and bruises. They wouldn't have recognized us if we had hailed them, nor stopped to answer either, it being unlawful to speak with slaves on a chain. Sandy passed within 10 yards of me on a mule, hunting for me, I imagine. But the thing which clean broke my heart was something which happened in front of our old barrack in a square, while we were enduring the spectacle of a man being boiled to death in oil for counterfeiting pennies. It was the sight of a newsboy, and I couldn't get at him. Still, I had one comfort. Here was proof that Clarence was still alive, and bang away! I meant to be with him before long. The thought was full of cheer. I had one little glimpse of another thing, one day, which gave me a great uplift. It was a wire, stretching from housetop to housetop, telegraph or telephone, sure. I did very much wish I had a little piece of it. It was just what I needed in order to carry out my project of escape. My idea was to get loose some night, along with the king, and then gag and bind our master, change clothes with him, batter him into the aspect of a stranger, hitch him to the slave chain, assume possession of the property, march to Camelot, and... but you get my idea. You see what a stunning, dramatic surprise I would wind up with at the palace. It was all feasible, if I could only get hold of a slender piece of iron, which I could shape into a lockpick. I could then undo the lumbering padlocks with which our chains were fastened, whenever I might choose. But I never had any luck. No such thing ever happened to fall in my way. However, my chance came at last. A gentleman who had come twice before to dicker for me, without result, or indeed any approach to a result, came again. I was far from expecting ever to belong to him, for the price asked for me from the time I was first enslaved was exorbitant, and always provoked either anger or derision. Yet my master stuck stubbornly to it. $22. He wouldn't bate a cent. The king was greatly admired because of his grand physique, but his kingly style was against him, and he wasn't salable. Nobody wanted that kind of slave. I considered myself safe from parting from him because of my extravagant price. No, I was not expecting to ever belong to this gentleman whom I have spoken of. But he had something which I expected would belong to me eventually, and it would but if he would but visit us often enough. It was a steel thing, with a long pin to it, with which his long cloth outside garment was fastened together in front. There were 3 of them. He had disappointed me twice because he did not come quite close enough to me to make my project entirely safe, but this time I succeeded. I captured the lower clasp of the 3, and when he missed it, he thought he had lost it on the way. I had a chance to be glad about a minute, then straightway a chance to be sad again. For when the purchase was about to fail, as usual, the master suddenly spoke up and said what would be worded thus in modern English.
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm tired supporting these 2 for no good. Give me $22 for this one, and I'll throw in the other one.
The king couldn't get his breath.
He was in such a fury. He began to choke and gag, and meantime the master and the gentleman moved away discussing.
You keep the offer open.
'Tis open till tomorrow this hour.
Then I will answer you at that time, said the gentleman, and disappeared, the master following him. I had a time of it to cool the king down, but I managed it. I whispered in his ear to this effect: Your grace will go for nothing, but after another fashion, and so shall I. Tonight we shall both be free.
Ah! How is that?
With this thing which I have stolen.
I will unlock these locks and cast off these chains tonight. When he comes about 9:30 to inspect us for the night, we will seize him, gag him, batter him, and early in the morning we will march out of this town proprietors of this caravan of slaves.
That was as far as I went. Oh, hang on. We're about to start up with ads, so let's set a highlight here. I lost track of time there. So we got an ad break starting. We will kick back up as soon as we return. And then we'll finish up the last 3 pages of this session and see about finishing up for the evening. All right. We'll be back in just a bit. Thank you very much. All right, we are back. So, we've just got about 2.5-ish pages to go tonight, so we will wrap up this chapter and have a bit of a yap and then see where we'll end up tonight. That was as far as I went, but the king was charmed and satisfied. That evening we waited patiently for our fellow slaves to get to sleep and signify it by the usual sign. We must not take any chances on those poor fellows if you can avoid it. It is best to keep your own secrets. No doubt they fidgeted only about as usual, but it didn't seem so to me. It seemed to me that they were going to be forever getting down to their regular snoring. As the time dragged on, I got nervously afraid we shouldn't have enough of it left for our needs. So I made several premature attempts, and merely delayed things by it, for I couldn't seem to touch a padlock there in the dark without starting a rattle out of it, which interrupted somebody's sleep and made him turn over and wake some more of the gang. But finally, I did get my last iron off and was a free man once more. I took a good breath of relief and reached for the king's irons. Too late! In comes the master with a light in one hand and his heavy walking staff in the other. I snuggled close among the wallow of snorers to conceal as neatly as possible that I was naked of irons, and kept a sharp lookout, and prepared to spring for my man the moment he would bend over me. But he didn't approach. He stopped, and gazed absently toward our dusky mass a minute, evidently thinking about something else, then set down his light, moved musingly toward the door, and before a body could imagine what he was going to do, he was out of the door and had it closed behind him. Quick, said the king, fetch him back! It was, of course, the worst thing to do, and I was up and out in a moment, but dear me, there were no lamps in those days, and it was a dark night, but I glimpsed a dim figure a few steps away. I darted for it, threw myself upon it, and then there was a state of things, and lively. We fought and scuffled and struggled and drew a crowd in no time. They took an immense interest in the fight and encouraged us all they could, and, in fact, couldn't have been pleasanter or more cordial if it had been their own fight. Then a tremendous row broke out behind us, and as much as half of our audience left us with a rush to invest some sympathy in that. Lanterns began to swing in all directions. It was the watch gathering from far and near. Presently, a halberd fell across my back as a reminder, and I knew what it meant. I was in custody. So was my adversary. So we were marched off toward prison, one on each side of the watchman. Here was disaster. It was a fine scheme gone to sudden destruction. I tried to imagine what would happen when the master should discover that it was I who had been fighting him, and what would happen if they jailed us together in that general apartment for brawlers and petty lawbreakers, as was the custom. And what might... Just then, my antagonist turned his face around in my direction. The freckled light from the watchman's tin lantern fell on it, and, by George, he was the wrong man! All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 36. And that'll be where we end up for tonight. So let's get out of our little reading note for now. So, we've seen all sorts of misadventures tonight. The discussions and loss of trust from the villagers, the socioeconomic downfall of society, the descent into chattel slavery, and now an unfortunate, very unfortunate escapade on escape, with a brush with justice, or injustice, as the case may be. So, we'll have to see what further adventures and misadventures things will shape up into when we get back to this on Tuesday night. This is a gentle reminder that we've always had, that Mark Twain is usually pretty reasonably right about quite a lot of things. His opinions are respectable more often than not. So, when he gripes about the injustice of something happening, the horror, it's, yeah, he's got a very consistent hatred of slavery and injustice both. It carries through in all of his works, really. We didn't see a whole lot of it when we were reading Tom Sawyer, but it's much, much, much more prevalent in Huck Finn, where he humanizes the other as best he can, and that was a terrifically uncommon opinion and stance to take for the time. So, Twain is good folk. Good folk. As always, a product of the time, but he was ahead of his times. And, as such, is one of those that you don't often need to pull your punches with as you're reading. He's not someone that you're going to run into too much trouble. Maybe some self-censoring of specific vocabulary choices from time to time, but that's just because words and language evolve. Yeah, Huck Finn is a lot more social commentary. Tom Sawyer is a boy's adventure. It makes sense, too, because Huck Finn is the older of the boys, and is the second novel that he really started coming out with. As after he had been successful with Tom Sawyer, he's like, all right, let's let the world know how I actually think, not just a boy's adventure story. Anyway, I'm always happy to read Mark Twain, and this has been a joy to read so far. And we are, let me see, how far along are we? We're at about 80% through now, so we just have a few days left of this one, I should think. It's really sneaking up on us. I think this was the 7th reading. We'll probably finish by around 10 or so. So, it's a solid middling length book. And it feels like it's not going to overstay its welcome. We've gone a little off the rails in today's reading, but it still feels well in character. I think the first half of the book is certainly a little bit more in line with what people expect when they hear Yankee in King Arthur's Court. It's a lot closer in line to the bastardized adaptations that we saw with like a kid in King Arthur's Court, the Disney movie and such. They more focus on the beginning of things and not so much on the sin of being slaves. That wouldn't play very well for a Disney movie. No, not at all. All right, guys, let's go ahead and see if there are any friends around that we can jump over to tonight. As always, we prefer to head over to fellow readers whenever we can. So, let's see. Wait, Disney made a slasher film? I'm out of the loop on this one. Okay, let's see. This guy is reading... Oh, the Bhagavad Gita? Holy moly. Is this guy reading Emma Frost, the White Queen? Is reading or writing? Oh, reading comics, I think. Interesting. A bunch of writers tonight. Somebody reading their own book. Jeff is reading tonight, but she's been going for about an hour and a half, so it might be better to... she kind of goes long, though. Let's see... Oh, okay, that... Yeah, Disney has their greedy, grubby little paws in just about everything, so it wouldn't surprise me that there are studios that are not quite completely under the thumb, but still under the umbrella of Disney, that put out some questionable content. Oh, somebody else is reading Farewell to Arms. That's a fun turnabout. Oh, I think I need to refresh. I might be getting a stale list. Something about Twitch, whenever I go to raid, if I hadn't actually refreshed my things. Alright, let's see. Alright, yeah, Jev. We've got the Bhagavad Gita. Oh, somebody's reading Medusa's Coil. Oh, that's pre-recorded. Let's see. Not a big, long list of readers tonight. Let's see. Alright, let's see. Let me go on for... Let me see what they're... Not reading their own. Mother's Day, Nancy Drew. Sorry, just scrolling through the list and seeing if there's anybody that looks familiar. This guy looks interesting. Let's see. Oh, no, they're pre-recorded. Dagnabbit. I don't mind pre-recordings and I don't mind rebroadcasts. I'm going to be getting into that myself, but that's not who I prefer to raid into. If we're raiding into someone, I want them to be a person there. All right, let's go ahead and we're going to head over to Jev tonight. She's who we raided into, I think last Sunday it was, reading Nancy Drew, a fellow lover of public domain works, and generally fun, everyone's aunt sort of thing. So let's go ahead and head over tonight and give her our very best. As a reminder, our next stream will be on Tuesday, where we'll be continuing A Yankee in King Arthur's Court. We always stream both on YouTube and Twitch, and just sort of whichever tends to be your own fancy. All of our VODs are on YouTube for perpetuity, so if you haven't yet, a like on the stream and a follow on the channel over there, or a subscription to the channel over there, would be welcome and will help convince the algorithm to send more friends our way. If you're joining us on Twitch, thank you. And a follow is really all I ask. I hope you've enjoyed your stay and will join us next time as we continue our extraordinary journey through the works of Mark Twain and other fantastic authors. All right, as always, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful night. We will be raiding over to Jev tonight. Make sure to give her all of our love. She's a fantastic lady and a fellow lover of literature. Until next time, good night.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell. It's bouncing up.